Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so glad we're spending this time here today. We have a very tough topic to talk about, but it needs to be heard and there needs to be discussion around this. Our guest today is Maralee McLean, and she's here to talk to us about her book, Prosecuted but Not Silenced: Courtroom Reform for Sexually Abused Children. Now, Maralee is a child advocate, protective parent, domestic violence expert, professional speaker, and author. She has written several articles for the ABA Child Law Journal, among other publications across the country, on the problems of family courts not protecting abused children. Maralee is associated with Women's Media Center, She Source Experts, and National Partnership to End Interpersonal Violence. She presents at conferences across the country on these topics, including law schools, and as a spokesperson for Protective Mothers. So let's welcome to the show, Maralee.
Thank you, Marianne. It's my pleasure to be here.
It's such a pleasure to have you here. And my goodness, I mean, your book, it just broke my heart to read it. I mean, I couldn't put it down once I started reading it. And it's a tough read, but it's a discussion we need to be having.
Absolutely. It's very important that society gets what is happening in these kind of cases. And I'm not alone. There are thousands of them.
Mm-hmm. Well, and your subtitle for your book is Courtroom Reform for Sexually Abused Children. And I was shocked to learn of the things that our courts are not really stepping up or taking charge of when it comes to child sexual abuse. And so, we'll kind of go there in a minute, but I want to talk a little bit about how this journey started for you.
It started many years ago, so this is a case that was over 25 years ago, and my daughter was only 2.5. I was divorced. I had full custody of my daughter, and I had been in a domestic violence marriage, had gotten out when my daughter was 6 months old, and the abuse came prevalent at about 2.5. She disclosed sexual abuse by her dad in front of a friend of myself and the daycare provider. So I didn't, naive to all this, and long before you heard about sexual abuse on TV or cases about it like you hear every day today, I just thought the system would work and do the right thing and protect my child. And little did I know what I was in for. And so once it was disclosed and it went to social services, time and time again, no matter how much she told or what happened to her in detail, I lost her or they gave her more time with her father. And that's prevalent in all these cases. So that's why I keep repeating all these cases, because I really want the public to know, because obviously this is what I do now as an activist, is trying to help other mothers and children. So it could happen to you. It could happen to anybody.
I was absolutely floored to hear that the courts would actually not only not prosecute the father, but not they're still giving the child who's being sexually abused to the dad, and it was heartbreaking just to hear what was going on. And she was Amy was very big as far as being able to. She used pretty good language and being able to explain what was going on with her more than you would think,
Yeah, I really, she was very articulate at a young age, and I don't think, he even thought she would be able to disclose the way she did. And she was very brave as a little girl coming forward like that. I mean, she continued to tell policemen, doctors, social workers, psychologists. She told family and friends she wanted to be believed, and she told everybody. And it was not something that wasn't coached or rehearsed. I mean, I had the top doctors in the state of Colorado, Children's Hospital. At this point, by the time she was 4, she had physical evidence. And they wrote a letter to the judge saying, please contact us concerning the abuse of this child. And the judge threw that letter out. And it wasn't one judge, because I had 7 judges. So every judge rubber stamped what the previous judge had done. And a lot of this is taking place, and I don't know, Marianne, if you caught that in the book, where Parental Alienation Syndrome, PAS, by Richard Gardner was brought into this. And that's really where this took hold in the 80s, where all these women start losing custody. And today they still use that theory, which is debunked, or it's junk science, as according to the AMA or the APA, American Medical Association, or the American Psychological Association. However, they still use it. And that's why a lot of these women are losing their children to the abuser. So they call it the one thing to use for a father to want to get custody is to use PAS or parental alienation in order to gain that child. And a lot of these guys are domestic abusers.
Yeah, where they continue the abuse and they're getting away with it. Yeah.
Yes.
And so with the PAS, that's pretty much the dad saying, well, I'm being separated from my child, right?
Yeah, they use the fact, Richard Gardner started this theory, as I said, in the 80s, and he self-published his books, and he sent them to every court in the nation. And in his own books, he states we all have some pedophilia within us, that it makes little girls and little boys that are sexual partners, and that it's God's will, so things that are just very sick. And his theory took hold that if a woman's bringing this up, then jail this mom, gag this mom, shut this woman down. Well, we've had national studies where it's only 2% of false allegations. Most women that come forward on this issue of their child being abused, they're coming in good faith. They're just trying to protect their children.
And
so
trying to find help for that,
yeah, they're getting punished for that, and they're being gag orders, and they're being jailed for just trying to protect their children because they, won't stop. Obviously, a mother is, going to go after, like I always said somewhere, I said in my book, a mother's first instinct is to protect her child. And when the means of power to do this are stripped unjustly from a mother, there are no words to describe that constant heartache that's felt as each day passes by. This pain for these women and these children being taken from that sole caretaker, that one that's trying to protect them and help them, is the ultimate of abuse. And not only that, it's just a re-victimization over and over again through our court system. Mm-hmm. And it's a lack of education.
Well, obviously, every court system in the U.S. needs to read your book, Prosecuted
yes,
but not
I feel
silent.
That way.
They really should. I mean, if they're in the judicial system, if they're police officers, whatever the case is, if they social workers, they really need to pick up this book and read what the reality is like.
Yeah, because we are jeopardizing generations and generations of children. And I always used to just look at the children's side of it, obviously because I was a mother going through it and I was fighting for my daughter, and that's all that mattered to me. But those women that are going through this and being subjected to the courts the way they are, these are women with great careers. I mean, when I testified before Congress, I was with a woman that was an attorney, a doctor, from every walk of life. It doesn't matter where you're coming from, educated or not or whatever, wealthy or not. It doesn't matter. You're going to lose. And what's amazing is those women are also ruined because they lose their jobs, they're financially bankrupted, and they're not functioning. So you're kicking that woman out of society, too, of being productive. And you can look at the ACE research study. I shouldn't probably bring that up, but I should. But it's Adverse Childhood Experiences, and that actually shows and breaks down how much of this is costing. And I don't go into the money side of it that much because I really want to hit, like you said, to get these judges and lawyers and police and everybody educated on what's happening. But the money side of it is phenomenal because this is our health risk to our nation, is not protecting these kids and having them come out with more abuse like this.
And then you're talking, it's got to be just horribly, just the mental abuse that they go through with all of this, and being able to try to come out the other side is just got to be so tough.
Yeah, I can't even. I just remember my daughter telling me when I had supervised visits with her, and she would go into those supervised, and it was a killer. The worst part of this is I lost my daughter to him, even with all the medical reports and doctor's reports, police reports stating she's being abused. It didn't matter how much evidence was coming in. They were going to continue down the road they were on. And I had supervised visits for 8 years where I was treated as a hardened criminal, and we were in a little room 8 by 10 feet, and I watched her suffer tremendously, and I watched her change. I mean, she was this little girl that when I would go down the street with her when she was little, she's in this personality, dancing eyes, I know everybody's kid is like that, but people would stop me to talk to her. She just was bubbling. She was oozing with love, life, everything. And I watched her eyes go into trance-like state. I watched her change tremendously going through all this, and why wouldn't she? And actually, years of that. And she's telling me, I fly to your house at night, Mommy, and I'm on the windowsill, but I'm always with you. And, lots of things. I won't go into detail, but it was heartbreaking. And because you read my book.
Yeah. Well, and most people would go like, gosh, why would a court make you have supervised visits when he's the one that's sexually abusing the daughter?
That is, I can explain that. What happens is court system brings in custody evaluators. So these judges are bringing in GALs, guardian ad litem, that are lawyers for the child that really aren't trained in this area, number one. And then you've got court-appointed evaluators or CFIs or custody evaluators, and they carry a lot of weight coming into the court. So if that judge is ignoring evidence that should be allowed in the courtroom and those custody evaluators aren't bringing in that evidence either, even if the judge gets it, he still didn't do anything in my case. None of them did. Mm-hmm. But the bottom line is these evaluators, according to Dr. Saunders' study, which is with the Justice Office, states that there's lack of training here for these people. I mean, they're not trained in how to handle this. Like domestic violence is usually, like I said, in most of these cases, and then it moves into abuse of children. That right there should put an alert to the judges, to the guardian ad litem, to social service, to anybody that's involved in these cases to understand how that works. These guys are masterminds at what they do. They're educated. Not all these guys are abusing, but they're masterminds at manipulating. And they manipulate the system on top of it. But for them to ignore all that is still unbelievable to me. And they did. And it turned it around onto me because in the best interest of the child, it's the parent that's more able to nurture the relationship with the other child. And in my case, obviously, I was not able to nurture the relationship with the father and child. I didn't want her with him. I wanted her safe. So I was the bad parent because of that. It's as if abuse wasn't happening.
Yeah, and we talked about this just a little bit earlier, before we started our interview here today. But it's amazing that the courts, they're not looking at the sexual abuse as a crime, and it is a crime.
Absolutely. I mean, the DA in my case admitted, as you know in the book, that he believed my daughter was being abused. And let's see what that lower court judge does. But if he takes that child away from you, we will step in to do something. And he never did. And so, this doesn't belong in family court. This is an evidentiary hearing in family court. You don't bring in the evidence. Doesn't come into account. That belongs in criminal court, where they actually go in and put the evidence there. So those police reports and those doctor reports come in. Judges don't even want to hear that. And family court judges, they're only on the bench, some of them, for 2 years. And they're not trained. They don't have any training on abuse or domestic violence or any of that. And they don't really want to hear it anyway. And then on top of it, it's criminal, and it doesn't even belong there because obviously you've got to be able to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt in criminal court. And a lot of these cases, you won't have enough evidence to prove it in criminal court. So, there's a lot that needs to be done here to change the system and to make a difference in what's happening out there and the destroying of the lives of the children that are being destroyed.
Yeah, I mean, I think the court system needs to take a hard look at how they're handling these cases and make recommendations to criminal courts to see about having, at least justice done for the child and at least have the child be in a safe place.
Absolutely. I think, go ahead, sorry.
No, please go ahead.
No, I just was thinking that there's nothing worse for a child to disclose like these children are doing or like my child did. Mm-hmm. And then to believe in that one parent that's going to protect them or that one person that's going to protect them and not understand. Like my daughter used to say to me, Mommy, how come no one believes me, Mommy? Why do I have to go to my dad's? And, how do you explain to a child, who are the good people, Mommy? Who are the bad people? She just couldn't understand why nobody was helping her. Yeah. And I think that in alone, the trauma of abuse is horrific. Obviously, we all know that by studies and what happens to people that have been sexually abused or abused like this, and then for them to go on in life. But a child that had a mom fighting for her like my daughter did, and then the trauma of the system on top of that is just ultimate of abuse, because it's, like we said, a double whammy. She's too little to understand what's going on, but she knows she has to see her mom in a supervised setting for 8 years, and she can't come home to her home. She loved her home. She's not allowed to see any family or friends. Anybody close to her, she was cut off from. So she was pretty much isolated.
Mm. Well, and really the justice system, the court system really did fail Amy in all of this.
Absolutely. They sure did.
Yeah.
And they're failing hundreds of thousands more. I mean, I get calls every day from women all across the nation. And, I mean, they're pouring their hearts and soul out to me. And the one thing that, like, when I speak, and I speak before women that are going through this or whatever, the reason I continue to speak and do what I do, because I'm giving them hope. And when they see me standing up there speaking, I'm not saying I'm not crushed on the inside and I'm not dying even to this day, because it still kills me. I hear a little girl cry, somewhere in a grocery store or whatever, I'm automatically looking. So, I was traumatized in my own way, but I'm going out there and speaking because I want to make a difference, and I want people to know what's going on. And this isn't just happening to a few people and a few women, it's happening to thousands. And so when I speak at these conferences, those women will come up to me afterwards, and I give them hope, because they see me standing up there strong and powerful or empowered, and I have my daughter, and we have a great relationship. It gives them hope.
Yeah. And, has it ever been, was Lance ever, that was your ex-husband's name is Lance, was he ever prosecuted for the abuse?
Oh, no.
Yeah, so to this day, he's gotten off scot-free.
Oh, yes. There was no prosecution. He was more than scot-free. I mean, it was more that I was the criminal, like I said in my book, and I was labeled with PAS, Parental Alienation Syndrome, and they quoted Richard Gardner throughout my my court hearings. And one thing was, and I did have a lot of news media coverage on my case. I wasn't one that sat silently. I had, once I lost her, it was like nothing was going to stop me. I went to the governor of Colorado. I went to Washington, D.C. I lobbied. I mean, I never stopped turning over every stone to get her home and to protect her. And I had a rally at the Capitol, national rally, where women came in from all across the nation, mothers. And then also the woman that had the rally with me was a big attorney out of New Jersey. And she was a domestic violence survivor herself, but she started a clinic for National Center for Protective Parents. And I contacted her, and she kept getting calls from mothers like myself, and she thought they were all crazy. And then she realized what was going on. She wrote a lot of papers on this issue, and brilliant woman. But when we had that rally at the Capitol, I didn't know I was going to lose my daughter. I had that plan for 6 months, and it was really difficult to pull all that together. And I remember getting up on the Capitol steps to speak, and it wasn't even my voice speaking. It was like I didn't even have a speech ready. I'd been speaking at law school, but I just kind of ad-libbed. But it was coming from my heart and my soul and all the news media there. And I thought that day that we were going to change the system, that there was enough out there that I would get my daughter back and they would know what they'd done wrong, and this was enough evidence to get out there that would change the system. And going on CNN International News maybe 6 years later, they did an excellent piece on this, on PAS with Richard Gardner, and it was the only piece I've seen out there with him actually on it. And he committed suicide maybe 10 years ago and stabbed himself in the upper part of his chest and body, which is really crazy. It shows how competent he really was. But the bottom line is that piece was excellent that CNN did. They did a great job, and they covered everything. And there was another mother on there with me, did both of our stories. And it was an incredible piece. And that was 94, and we're in 2018, and this is still going on. So we talk about Me Too. This is Me Too.
Yeah. I just can't fathom that. I mean, it's like that kind of legislation is, and those laws are still in the Stone Age. It's the court system obviously needs to have some new laws put in place when it comes to these kind of things. And is that part of what you're fighting for?
Yeah, all of it. I mean, I believe, a lot of us are working on legislation and trying to change the laws and whatnot. But even in Colorado, we have in the best interest of the child statute. I went to lobby on this bill for a long time and got it in there that if there's domestic violence and child abuse or child sexual abuse, you have to look at that first in the best interest of the child. But that's still not happening, even if that's in the law. The real part comes to the education. It comes to going way back. If you really go way back where fathers, didn't really have custody and women were now going in the workforce and both were, this isn't about a custody issue. That's where they really get hung up on, because good parents will work out the relationship with the other parent, even if they don't really like them, to make sure, because they love their kids, they're going to make sure things go the right way for their children, whether it's the mother taking care of the children or the father. It's really what's best for the children. But when you're in a custody case like these what they call them contingency cases, but they're really not. They're abuse cases. And when there's abuse going on, there's no better way for this abuser is to go into the court and fight that way, especially if there's abuse going on. The court's not going to look at the abuse. They're just looking at that woman as a vindictive ex-wife, or that they'll label her with PAS, or they label these women with all kinds of weird stuff. And it's judges not educating themselves on this. There's no real training. So what we're doing right now, I'm working with an organization called Fight Back Foundation, and we're collaborating with Darkness to Light, which is an organization that has probably 10,000 facilitators across the nation, and they're in 17 countries. And I'm helping them put together a program that will be training for judges, lawyers, social workers, psychologists, anybody involved in the system that is not seeing this the right way, and bring in PAS and all that. So we're putting that together. I'm working on a documentary that hasn't even started yet because we're trying to raise the funds for it, but ways to get this out there to the public and ways to get it out there to educate. Like you said, I really appreciate the fact that you said this book needs to be read by every judge, every lawyer, everybody involved in the system. I believe that too, because it's a perfect example of a case study of what's happening.
Yes. I mean, and what I find just so appalling, it's not like that both you and Amy weren't expressing what was going on. I mean, you were doing it over and over again. There were countless people that saw what was happening, and not one of them really, not until towards the later part of it, but not you didn't get people that were standing up and really, being the advocate for Amy.
Well, I always tell these moms, you're your own child's best advocate. You cannot give up. You cannot stop fighting. But we did have a lot of advocates on our side. I mean, children's hospital doctors, absolutely. The police, absolutely. I mean, there was a lot of reports there with evidence. That was due to the court not allowing that in and saying it had all been litigated before. It hadn't been. And because I wouldn't shut up, and because I continued to speak, and I did get the media involved, the judge, all my courtrooms were sealed. You could never, I was like, unbelievable. They sealed the courtroom, and I was never allowed to have anybody in there with me. And I can't tell you the things that went on in that courtroom. And one of the last hearings, because the media was outside the door, the judge put an 18-page court order, and I was chastised to the point of paying all legal fees, all attorney's fees, child support, everything. In other words, to bankrupt you, because I was already close to bankrupt anyway. I've been in this for 10 years, and you just can't financially live through that. And that's what they do. They bankrupt these women, so they have nothing left to fight, and they go pro se. So that's what I did. I went pro se. I started representing myself. And in some rounds, I don't tell women to do that, but going pro se, I had a voice. I never had a voice in the courtroom before. And I think I did a better job than a lot of my attorneys because I had a voice. Not because I know the law, I got crucified or, what motions to file, but I had a federal judge. He's no longer with us, but he was a retired judge who was helping me on my case. So I was turning in motions that were incredible, and I was filing stuff really incredible. But it was because of him, right? I had him helping me, but people didn't know that. But I still say, if these women are articulate enough and strong enough to go stand in that courtroom and go through that, you don't have nothing to lose because you're already lost. So I don't know.
Yeah. I just think that you're so courageous, because you've walked such a difficult path. Most people can't even fathom the path that you've gone through, especially when you talk about, after you get married and the initial abuse started and it, just kind of, a lot of women, and this is kind of part of the Me Too movement, when we talk about just abuse, sexuality, I mean, it touches so many women that most people who read your book are going to be able to go, gosh, you know what, I can relate to that a little bit.
Absolutely. I came from a background of a really happy-go-lucky family. I just had a really good upbringing, and I believed everybody was pretty much good. I just didn't see the bad in people. And, he came across as wonderful. And I think that's what these young girls I would really like to start speaking at colleges for these young girls, because that's where it starts. You make that mistake in the beginning. And, back in my day, we had no red flags for domestic violence. I thought you had to be beaten to a pulp to be domestically abused. I figured you had to have black eye or whatever, But that isn't what it is. There's emotional abuse. There's coercive control. There's all kinds of other abuses going on. But I had all of it. I had the physical. I had all of it in my marriage. And I would have never dreamed that I would be in something like that. And I was such a strong woman. I was very independent. I was more of a tomboy when I was young. I had 3 older brothers. So I grew up, believing women were equal, even when I was young. So I maybe was a feminist before I even knew it. But it was weird because I got caught up in that, and there's the good. Those men can be so good, and they're narcissistic, but they're so loving and kind and good, and you just see that good, and then they can turn and within 2 seconds be this my ex's eyes would go into very clear blue, scary eyes. I mean, within seconds, and you knew. Yeah. And I was walking on eggshells. So, I didn't know, and I would have never dreamed he would have ever hurt my daughter. Really, never. That was one of the reasons I married him, is because I thought he'd be a great father because he was so good with little kids. So, these women, young girls, need to watch out with who they marry. They've got the red flags there that I didn't have. And when you see those, I say run. Just run.
Well, and it's interesting. I mean, and I don't know what his diagnosis was. I know there was a couple that were listed, but I have talked with people. We've had authors on here before that talk about psychopaths, and they can be very charming and very sweet and like the man of your dreams or the person of your dreams. And, and then when they feel that they have that sense of control, then it switches like a light switch,
Exactly. And if they think they're losing that control of you, it switches too.
Mm-hmm.
I think there was a part in my book somewhere that I wrote exactly about that. It was an article. I think it was by Robert Hare. I don't remember. You probably read it, but it was something to do with how I wrote that down. I copied the article. I was only 21, and I copied that article. And then below it, it stated the narcissist, the psychopath, the sociopath, what you're dealing with. It was everything I was dealing with. And I said, what would you choose, Maralee? Don't you want a normal man versus this? And I kept that in my drawer all those years, and I put it in my book because I think a lot of women will go, yes, I see this. I saw it, and I was still with this man. So you wonder why these women don't get out. I'm one of them. I thought I was really strong and would never put up with anything.
Well, it's scary, too. I mean, it's a scary thing. It's not like you could just leave because, for people who are sociopaths.
I got out very carefully when I left him. I didn't know the stuff women know today, but I knew to be very careful how I did it, and I was. I did it in a really nice way, and I was very careful. Everything was very planned because I was afraid of him, very afraid of him.
Yeah, because it really is just you've got to be, especially if they're if they're suspected sociopaths. I mean, if they feel like they're being attacked in any way, they'll never let you go, and that's kind of what ended up happening with you guys.
I'll tell you, Marianne, I felt that way so much when I actually left him and got away from him. I felt like I'd had a ton of bricks lifted off my shoulders. I felt for the first time free. I didn't even realize how much I was under that whole time. I didn't even realize it. But I still didn't think it would go to where the abuse of her. I would have never. I mean, that's just a whole other part of this. Not every abuser is going to do something like what he did.
No, but it's definitely something that needs to be talked about, because when it does happen, we need to make sure that our courtrooms are looking at this with the correct light. They're not using old, outdated, obsolete data that has nothing to do with really, children that are being sexually abused.
I just, listen to the children. I mean, these children, especially young, like my daughter, they can't make up this stuff. They can't come out with those words. They can't express themselves. I mean, she was very expressive, and maybe some kids wouldn't be, but they aren't even going to tell you. But my daughter was very articulate and very expressive. So, how could you not believe that child? No child could come up with that stuff, all the things she was saying, and the fact that she was in pain. So how can a whole system ignore a child like this? It's still, it still makes me so sick to my stomach. I can't even tell you that she was having to live the life she had to live and being forced to. A lot of these women will say it's like a living death of your child, because it's like your child died, the child you had died, and it's a living death for them too, because they're living a life that they never dreamed. She went from night and day, from a happy-go-lucky, wonderful childhood until that, obviously it started very young, but having to go live with him after that was a nightmare.
Yeah. It's just unfathomable that would have been the outcome for her. And I applaud you for not only writing your book, but taking the stance that you are with this, because I know that this is a passion of yours now to, as a child advocate, to make sure that, some of these, the way that judges view this is changed. And, we are going to be having you back on to talk about this at a later date, because I want to hear more about what's happening, what the courts are doing to kind of make adjustments and make changes, and we're going to be supporting you all the way.
Oh, wonderful. I really appreciate you, and I'm very happy that we were able to connect. So thank you so much, and I appreciate your support in any way I can, and I know the rest of the women and children out there will too.
Of course. And where can our listeners connect with you, learn more about your book, and be part of your community?
I have a website. It's Maralee, Maralee, McLean is McLean.com. And my website's there. You can pretty much get a lot of the information there. My book is also there, so if you want to purchase it there. But I'm getting ready to republish it, so it will be out. You can pre-order at any of your, any bookstore, your favorite bookstore. You can pre-order it. And you can also get it off my website right now, the ones that I have that you just read.
Yeah, fabulous book, Prosecuted but Not Silent. It is a read that will make you cry, but it's something that we need to all be passionate about and see about changing this dynamic, because this cannot be happening, especially, this is 2018. I can't believe that the courts are running with Stone Age material. They need to be updated. They need to be looking at these children, because these are people who are going to be part of our community, and we need to make sure we do everything we can to help everybody.
Absolutely. Yeah. There was one thing I was going to say, that as women, I was at that rally for the March for Women, and anyway, what I'm thinking is I stood across the Capitol steps, and I was envisioning that rally that I had at the Capitol in 1994 when the VAWA Act was passed, and how we were pushing forward to make this change. And we're in 2018, and we're no further. And the other thing is that if women think we're equal, we're not even close when we can't keep our children safe, and we can't. So I think all women need to think about that and come together on this whole thing.
Yeah, we definitely need to take another hard look at what's happening there. Well, Maralee, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us today and sharing. It's a tough subject, but it needs to be had. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us here today.
Oh, I thank you, Marianne. I really do. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Maralee. It's been such an honor to have you here. and of course, raising this very important topic. We need to take a deeper look at what's happening in our court system with our children. And I urge all of you not only to purchase Maralee's book, Prosecuted but Not Silenced, but also join her on her community at her website and see how you can get involved at MaraleeMcLean.com. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Thursday, Friday, and Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.